Greetings, brothers and sisters. I want to do an introduction first. I got some Jimmy Kimmel stuff with Trump and Sarah Paulson, who said she went to a makeout party with other Hollywood celebrities, which I want to get into that. And Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel's sad obsession with Trump. And then there's some other things I had to get to as well. But the first part I want to say that I probably wouldn't watch my own videos. Like if somebody made videos, these same videos, but they were talking and it came through them, their ideas, I probably wouldn't enjoy these videos. I probably wouldn't sit through them. I can't do that anyway for the most part. When I was younger, I probably certainly wouldn't, even though there's information maybe I would have really been interested in. Maybe I wouldn't understand them. But for the most part, I have trouble listening to, I don't know what we call this, lectures or talks or whatever it is. Even podcasts. Like I can listen to it for a little bit, but then I lose interest in it. Like I can't listen to the whole thing. Now I just don't have time, right? And having watched so much stuff over my lifetime, like I, now have whatever they call, whatever TiVo stuff that's available, and being able to fast forward through commercials and free throw shooting and, in between plays in a football game. Like I can't believe I lived without that. Like I can't believe that there was a time in my life I used to sit through commercials, especially since commercials have gotten worse and worse over the years. And I don't like lectures. Like I don't have the personality configuration for it. I never really did. I had trouble paying attention in school. And so, I just don't like them, right? That's why I can understand why other people might not like these videos. They might not appeal to them, even though there's valuable information in them. Like I can understand why people like the videos. There's funny stuff in it and maybe some interesting points of view they're not going to hear from somewhere else. And the energy that's in the videos is calming for a lot of people. My connection to the heartfulness system and whatever energy that passes through me because of the practice of meditation, transmission, the heartfulness system. So I understand why people like the videos, but I personally, they're not for me. Like I have to listen to these things over and over again. I have to listen to my own voice. And even though when I listen to the videos, especially the older ones, I forgot almost everything that's in there. And some of the jokes are new to me. Most of the ideas are new to me. And so, some of the things are repetitive, but there's a lot of new stuff in a lot of my videos. And so if I listen to an old video, I'm listening to it almost like for the first time. And I guess I find them somewhat interesting, but I don't like it. There's a lot of talks given by Master Charji, the third master of the heartfulness system. And he gave, a talk at so many different gatherings and sometimes 2 or 3 talks and various training lectures and things. And when I was in person with him and he would give the talks, I didn't, necessarily love sitting there. Like I would listen to them on audio tape or I could watch them on DVD or on the internet. It's kind of interesting. But I don't really like live lectures for whatever reason, probably something to do with my family and my personality configuration, like I said. And then other people would give talks, like other practitioners, and I had trouble sitting through those, right? So that's why I don't get really upset when people are like, I don't like your video or it's boring or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I don't I wouldn't either. So I'm not my feelings aren't hurt like, oh, everybody should be hanging on my every word here. Because I understand why people like them, but personally, I don't. Like I like this part. Like I don't mind doing this part. It's probably the best part. But then I have to listen back to this, and I'll often read questions, read through comments, and things while I'm listening to this. And then when I have to edit the other parts that I do, where there's a video element where I'm talking over a screenshot, and there's a lot more errors. I make a lot more mistakes when I'm doing these voiceovers in Adobe Audition. I can correct the mistakes right then. So there's very few mistakes that I have to correct. Sometimes none, most of the times none. And then I can, put a single image or some compilation or something or video I've already looked through, and I don't have to go through the editing process. But when I do a screen grab with ScreenFlow, and then I, upload it or download it into Premiere Pro, and I have to go through it and edit it, there's a lot of edits and things like this. And, it gets tedious. I mean, I'm not, complaining. But again, I'm listening to myself over and over again. Like I'm listening to myself now, and then I have to listen to myself again later, right? I've already heard it. And so, I mean, it is what it is. I thought that would be interesting for people because I often get comments where people like, can you tell me where this video is, or can you re-upload, or can you give me a link to this video? I'm like, yeah, I don't even remember that. Like it's so long ago, right? And so, I mean, for me, I look forward to making the next one. Like I don't think about the past videos as much as I look forward to making the next one. Okay, so let's move on to the screen grab portion of the video. So I saw this headline on, I don't know, Huffington Post or Page 6 or something, probably, or Yahoo News, I think it was. And it's talking about Sarah Paulson going to a party hosted by Carrie Fisher. And let's just let her describe it here for herself.
And it was a party. It was called. She asked me if I wanted to come to Gore Vidal's makeout party. Was the title? It was a Gore Vidal's makeout party.
Gore Vidal was a writer, and
they don't know.
He would bring.
So he said what to a makeout party, and what are you guys in 8th grade? Now we've heard like all these various things about Hollywood parties and the parties of the so-called elite, and may or may not involve adrenochrome and sacrifices and things. People think they know whether that happens or not, but there's evidence that supports, well, Hollywood's a very twisted place. And we can see by the content. Now, this person, Sarah Paulson, made a short film in which she was dating a child. And, she was at like a restaurant, and I did a video on it some time ago. And it was at a restaurant, and she looked like she was the mom waiting for her son, but it was her boyfriend. It was really weird and very graphically, the conversations were sexual in nature between her and the kid. Weird, twisted stuff. And then her, being a part of American Horror Story and all the weirdness and twisted things there, Hollywood puts out a lot of twisted content, and what's in your insides manifests in your outer world. And so if you have a desire to make a movie about something, then you also have that desire to play it out in real life. And sometimes people have deviant fantasies and things, and they don't play it out in real life, but sometimes, many times they do. And people like this that don't have a lot of morals and ethics probably would be more likely to do that. But anyway, she's talking about going to a makeout party. What a bizarre thing, right? Like she's there in 30, I don't know how long ago this was. Carrie Fisher has been dead for a while. Carrie Fisher, her ashes are in a giant plastic Prozac pill, right? She loved Prozac and talked about it all the time, and I mean, that says a lot about her mental state.
Gore Vidal was a person. A man, a human man.
He's a human man.
He would bring, he was a writer, and he would bring people, he'd have these interesting parties, right?
Yes. And
makeout party.
Carrie had this, and it was her idea to call it the makeout party.
Oh.
It's a makeout party. Carrie Fisher, it's her idea.
Where Shirley MacLaine was, I mean, I think Queen Latifah was there. All these people were there, and I was obviously panicked because neurotic.
She's neurotic. they're all neurotic, right?
And
did people make out?
I didn't see anyone make out, but there was a hat with names in it, and you were supposed to make out with whomever you pulled out of the hat.
Really? Wow.
And Matthew Perry
Sounds like spin the bottle.
Pulled my name out of the hat and then promptly left the room. And I was like...
Wait, how do you know he pulled it out?
Because I saw him. He was like, oh, well. And he's like, I got you. And I was like, well, let's kiss. And he was like, no. And he...
What?
What?
No, he wasn't. It just, we knew each other a little bit through one of my very best friends in the world.
Was
and
it
so
awkward because you knew each other?
Yeah, but then we ended up playing romantic partners years later on a show called Studio 60, and then I got my kiss.
Oh, you did?
I got several kisses.
Just a very strange person, right? Just weird Hollywood stuff, immature stuff, right? I mean, that was a time when herpes was very prevalent. And they're having an adult makeout party. And this is the kind of stuff they'll tell you. But what else is happening behind the scenes?
And boy, did he regret not taking me up on it back at Gore Vidal's makeout party.
I think Matthew might not remember some of those years.
He might not.
Yeah,
he might not, yeah. He probably thinks...
Why? Because he's a drug addict?
We did make out at that party.
Yeah, just go with that.
I shouldn't disabuse him of that
Sarah
notion.
Paulson is with us. Her show is...
Wow, and it's just so fascinating. All right, let's move on to these other things. We're going to go back to Jimmy Kimmel in a moment. Florida woman goes to ATM to withdraw $20, discovers almost $1 billion in her account. It was a Chase bank. You know, Chase is one of the... It said her receipt shows $999 million. You know, she just... in her account. Oh, my God, I was horrified. I know most people would think they won the lottery, but I was horrified. Yeah, because you're not going to keep that money. You know, they're going to figure it out. But they misplaced $1 billion, Chase Bank. Like, that's not good to hear. I mean, this is a story about this woman, this older woman. But Chase Bank misplaced $1 billion. Like, that should be the headline. $1 billion they just, you know, dumped in some woman's account. And then it said, when I put in $20, the machine came back and said, we'll give you the 20, but that'll cause an overdraft and you will be charged. And I said, oh, just forget it. And so she had to call them several times. Finally, they, you know, I mean, they didn't jump on this problem, and that she had $1 billion of money. Here's the receipt. And so think about that, right? That's your banks at work for you. Stephen Colbert goes silent for 20 seconds when audience can't stop jeering Trump.
President, the flag fondler.
You know, how sad, right? And we know that people, this is, you know, they did something, probably put up a sign saying boo or whatever, right? That this guy, his obsession with Trump, and we saw this with CNN, is losing their viewership because even Trumpers are forgetting about Trump. Trump's inability to connect with people by being kicked out of social media has really backfired for the media and for these stupid comedians who can't let it go. They are constantly bringing up Donald Trump over and over again, even though he's like, where's Waldo? It's like Trump is, you know, like you can't find him anymore. And he's only being kept alive by all these, like, you know, these pathetic comedians and horrible news shows. And the ratings suck because people aren't interested anymore. These guys are booing, but you know it's just fake. You know, what? Just why? Why is this so great for you? Like, your jokes suck. You're not funny.
But how do you feel?
Whoa. Wow, you did that. You made that up right on the spot. Wow. Your comedic skills, your genius at work. Not to be outdone. Poor Eric. Jimmy Kimmel's thinks Trump took a subtle dig at his own son.
Yesterday, our former president, Donald Trump, shared a Father's Day holiday wish. He wrote, "Happy Father's Day to all, including the radical..."
Look at this thing. Where did you get this? Like, how tuned into you are? Like, I didn't know this thing came out.
Left, rhinos, and other losers of the world. Oh, poor Eric. That's not nice to say on Father's Day. But anyway, hopefully, eventually...
He's not talking about Eric, and just, you know, like, that's not a joke. Nobody laughed. They couldn't even get the laugh track on that one.
Eventually, everyone will come together, and by come together, he means accept me as your one true God. I feel like His heart's not even in these anymore. I think.
Yeah, because like he's got shut down. Like he got disappeared. The momentum's gone. He didn't have a good presidency. I mean, the people on the right loved him, and Trumpers loved him. But most of the movement happened on the left. If you really think about it, you Trumpers, most of the agenda that got pushed through under the 4 or 5 years of Trump was left-wing agenda. They won on so many things. They won on January 6th. They won on COVID. They won on, just about everything, on all these new liberal and Hollywood morality stuff that had to do with, with gender and all these things. They, pushed all this stuff through on social media. They censored on social media. They shut down, Fox News. They clipped their nuts. So many different ways that the left has won because of Trump. They use the outrage, all the stuff, the protests, the taking over of cities. Police are now, being demonized. Police that used to be heroes are now considered, bad and things like this. The media, all of it. They won all those things. Trump did very little because they were using him as a, controlled opposition to rally the forces and push through this agenda. And so he didn't have a good 4 years. He wouldn't have a good 4 years now. Like in terms of his second term is always worse. You're always weaker. The last 2 years is a lame duck. But this guy, of course his heart isn't into it. He's old, the whole thing. And, he doesn't have a platform anymore. And he didn't, put one together. And now people's attention span, they've moved on, even Trumpers. But these guys aren't moving on because they don't really have quality content. Trump is a part of every one of their monologues in different ways. Trump makes an appearance twice in this one.
Melania might be putting Lexapro in his Diet Coke or something. But we're learning more about just how poorly our Kentucky Fried Commander-in-Chief mismanaged the pandemic, thanks to a forthcoming book that details the chaos and infighting.
Really? Like, can we move on? Like everyone's kind of moved on from the pandemic.
That plagued Team Trump's response to the coronavirus. This book was written by reporters from the Washington Post who say that at the beginning of the pandemic, Trump suggested sending Americans who had been infected with COVID while they were traveling overseas to Guantanamo Bay. And
the Cubies would have loved that.
He said he wants to send them to Geronimo Bay or something like that. He didn't.
Not a professional comedian joke, and he has writers.
He has his aides. Don't we have an island that we...
Are you seriously cutting on Trump? Like what he did with Sarah Paulson when she, said that she went to a makeup party she went to a makeout party as an adult, and he didn't make fun of her, right? And that he, gave a free pass to Joe Biden's crackhead son, but Joe Biden is the king of flubs, and he's in gaffes, and he's talking about Trump like he misspoke all the time. Like, well, how sad. Like, you're not a comedian. You're not anything. Like, you just sold yourself out. And you can't be one-sided like this. You're supposed to be funny. And Joe Biden, think about how much, humor I get out of Joe Biden. And this guy, Trump is also funny. And I got humor out of Trump. But Trump isn't nearly the gaffe magnet that Joe Biden was. And then at the end of the show, he has this black and white segment.
United States death toll is now approaching 125,000.
The death toll, the worst of any country.
Right now, the next couple of weeks are going to be critical in our ability to address those surgings.
Okay, Mr. Surging General, forget critical numbers. What about what really matters? TV rating numbers.
So he has this recurring bit. I've seen it a couple times at the end of his monologue. I don't know if he does it every night, but it is 1 year ago today, and it's about COVID and crapping on Trump. And people have just moved on from Trump. Trumpers have, and pretty much all these other people have. But the media and these comedians are still finding any possible way to make Trump relevant so they can, continue their inability to create content on their own. They can't generate content by this massive, comedians should be feasting on, Joe Biden. Joe Biden is one of the funniest and most incompetent and messed up presidents, and he's got a crackhead son. And they're still focusing on Trump, and it's just sad. So I was going to end the video there, but then I saw this on the New York Post. They've made a horror film about Karens, where Karen is the monster. And yeah, that happened.
Guess this is a long way from East Point.
Baby, you just gotta give it a chance.
So it's a cul-de-sac neighborhood, and there is a family moving in, and I can tell by the tone of the movie that it is important to notice all the races of the people. This is supposed to make things better. Pay attention to the color of the skin of all the people, because it's going to be important to the plot, right? This is Karen. Listen to the music. It's so manipulative and, horror based. So I started making the first part of this video last night. I've already watched this trailer, and I feel like I'm in the editing process now. And I feel like I have to do a little bit of an introduction here because of the nature and climate that we are, undergoing right now, and the accusations and the arguments that I'm going to get from, I might get from people who are, left-leaning people, and the internet censorship police and all the rest of it. One of the things that I do here is I understand the opposite point of view, or all the demographics point of view, and the official story, the mainstream media official story. And what I believe is that the narratives and the analysis that I give here is deeper. It's a much deeper understanding of what's going on. I got a comment from a QB who, that is, it's on the same level of this Karen movie, and I want to, weave these things together here. The person wrote, it was my video, Anderson Cooper's Strange Family links to the CIA and Skull and Bones and the end of CNN. And the person wrote, the QB wrote, those who followed a certain Anon already knew all this. And the comment basically is saying that I'm coming to the party late, right? And they didn't watch my video because I say things and my analysis is deeper and better than anything that came out of the Q movement. The Q movement and, Q, whatever that entity was, is like truther stuff for dummies. Like they have those books, whatever it is, Farming for Dummies or, Juggling for Dummies or whatever it might be. And what it was that in 2017, this had been attempted by a few people. I don't know if it was started off being the intelligence community, one of the intelligence branches, probably the CIA, but someone claiming to have Q-level clearance, high-level security clearance in the government, started to publish truther stuff, existing truther narratives that was covered by people like me and other people for years for right-wing dummies. They had, they tailored the messages to appeal to right-wing dummies, right? People who are still wound too tight to be able to wake up completely, still, clinging to their demographic, clinging to their belief system and the prejudices and the, Republican Party and all the right-wing stuff. So they couldn't open up completely to these truther narratives. And so this information that we had put out, various, people had put out, I had a YouTube channel since 2007, right? And that's 10 years before Q even existed. So I made videos about Anderson Cooper and these other people, but they were better videos and, more comprehensive videos. And I made a distinction between what is theory, what is speculation, and what is fact. I started to do that, I don't know when. Years and years ago, because I started to see that there was all these things that are put out there and people consider them to be factual, and they weren't factual. They were, theories and speculation. And that's really important because that distinction, and QBs and, people like that, Trumpers and, all these various groups, putting out things that weren't factual and announcing them like they were facts and announcing them like they were, they were truths, and then acting on them impulsively and emotionally in all kinds of different bad ways is what's wrecked the truth community. And then along with that is this fake woke movement that also developed at the same time, which was a liberal version, which was truther stuff for dummies, right? Again, for liberals this time. And racism is a big part of it, right? And Donald Trump being the demon of the woke movement and the hero of the Q movement. And that is, the centerpiece, because these things centered around Donald Trump, both these new movements. And they took existing truther narratives and then folded them into these points of view. And they're both being run by the people who control the system, the intelligence communities and the people who, order them to do things to divide people. Where the truth movement could have been something to bring people together, at least most people together, it's now become divisive, right? And there's these existing narratives, Democratic and Republican and liberal and conservative narratives that have woven themselves into this the truth movement. It's become a binary situation. And it's got a lot of dumb people who don't have the ability to understand abstract thought. And I talked about this years and years ago. I said this was going to happen with the right-wing people, with the Trumpers and the QBs. I said how it was going to be used. They wanted to create a profile that everyone's crazy and, on the right, everyone's, in terms of the truth community, everyone's crazy conspiracy theorists. They're dangerous, right? They're, potential domestic terrorists or whatever it was. And they are racist and all these other negative things. And I said the same thing about the woke movement in 2015 when Trump was running for president, 2015 and 16, that whoever was president then, whether it was Hillary or Trump, it was going to be used, that person was going to be used to divide the country more and divide the country based in race as one of the big divisions, that there was going to be race riots and race wars because the money was gone. There was no money. The system can't be fixed. That's the problem. Both of these movements, and, so many people don't understand, the money is, there's no money anymore. America is going down. America is no longer going to be the dominant country. And so when America collapses, and it's in the collapsing phase, and I think most people, if you look at it with any sort of critical thinking skills, there's so many signs of the system collapsing, America collapsing. No longer America, we're number one. That's, all that shit's gone, right? And the American citizens are all entitled, right? American citizens are clueless to what life is for other people around the world and for their ancestors or whatever it is, right? And so things have just gotten better and better in terms of comforts, in terms of technology. And so most Americans, everybody who's not been through some epic trauma and economic collapse in their own lives, hasn't lived in dire poverty, feel entitled to an ever-improving lifestyle. And so when that is taken away, and there's going to be things that are taken away in the near future, it's not, this is going to start showing up. It's showing up now, it's starting now, and it's just going to get worse. And so when this happens, people, an angry mob is going to want to blame people. They're going to want to, have answers. They're going to want to blame leadership. And so for the right, it's going to be Biden's. It's going to be, people of color. It's going to be liberals. It's going to be whatever it might be, right? For right-wing leaning people, you are given a group of people on a daily basis on Fox News, the woke people, right? All the people that you are going to demonize, and when things go south, that's who you're going to blame. This is very simple. It's a very simple psychological operation. The people who control the system want division, and they want you to blame each other. People on the left are going to blame Trumpers and QBs and Republicans and white people and all these things. And so this is the, these are the targets. These are the, they're setting up where you're going to vent your anger, right? And I said this was going to happen in both of these movements. In 2016 with the, 15 and 16 with the Trump stuff, I said there's going to be, racial wars. They want race wars. This is what they're pushing for. And they want to make Trump and Trump supporters the villains to embolden people on the left, people of color, people in the LGBTQ communities, all these people who have felt targeted and harassed and demonized and marginalized by the people that they think are in control of the system. This white culture, this idea of the white privilege and things like this. And so they were being emboldened. They were given this false sense of security that they could openly speak about what they consider their victimization and oppression. And that somehow at the end of this thing, they were going to be viewed in a positive light, a more positive light. And this was going to help them get a bigger piece of the pie, get more for their group and more for their demographics. That when all the dust settles, that after they state their point of view and, push this narrative will become the dominant narrative. And the people that run social media and the mainstream media have basically said that to them. I basically, saying, all right, now you guys are going to run things. You guys are going to, get more of the power. And they've changed what's in movies, and they changed the protagonists in TV shows, and they're including these narratives and all these things in movies and, whatever content is coming out now. And these groups are being protected on social media, and they're called marginalized groups or protected groups. And if you're a white person, you're not supposed to say anything criticizing these groups or demographics or whatever it is. And people think, well, the status quo is changing. People on the left, people in, one of these sorts of groups is thinking, oh, wow, we're going to get things better. Things are going to go our way. The pie is going to be divided in a more favorable way for all of us. And there is no pie. Like, that's the problem. There's no pie anymore. We're in crushing debt, like overwhelmingly crushing debt. And there's all these telltale signs, which I point out all the time here, that not only is the global system collapsing, but the American system is more specifically collapsing, which has always been the model for this thing, this economic system globally. But now that's no, that was the lure. That was the everybody can be like America. All these other countries, you can all live like Americans. But that was never a possibility, because it is a system of, it's a hierarchical system where there's going to be a small group of people that are devouring the lion's share of the resources, and all these other groups, the impoverished countries or people in every country, are getting bigger, and the people who are in the rich category, that's an ever shrinking amount of people that are absorbing more and more resources. And so there's no, like, everyone's going to be America. In fact, America isn't going to be America. America is going to be like China. America is going to be like one of these other countries where there's going to be the, rich, the ultra wealthy, and then everybody else. And so this is, you can see it happening. And so this isn't a matter of bringing other people up. Like, there's these, white privileged people. This is the view that there's white privileged people living in, wealthy neighborhoods, cul-de-sacs, and things like this in suburbia, and that everyone else is going to be brought up to that level, and everyone else is going to, everyone's going to be equal, and it's all going to be, some wonderful thing. There's just some growing pains. I mean, that's the view that people have. But what's really happening is people are, more conscious of their demographics and are starting to choose sides based in their, external, whatever it might be, their color of your skin, your, whatever the superficial aspects of your life are, your religion, your belief system, whether you live in the country or the city or, whatever it is. Almost everybody feels under attack, and you feel the pressure to start choosing sides, right? To start, I mean, don't you feel it? Like, everyone is feeling this, that your demographic is under attack, and you have to choose sides. And when everything goes down, when there is a reduction in lifestyle, and you have this rage coming from clueless, entitled people that don't understand any of the things that I'm saying here, they're going to want to blame people, attack people. And we've seen this happen before in country after country. And what it does for the people who are the so-called elite, the people I call the controllers, it keeps the masses from venting their anger at the people who control the system, who have created this nightmare scenario. And I talked about this years ago. I've talked about this for years personally. And then, when this happened years and years ago, when your ancestors were lured off the farm and brought to the cities and the suburbs and gave up all their survival skills and their connection to nature and their, all the things, agrarian farming skills and the community they had, the village or tribal communities they have, with the promise you were never going to need those things again. You just had to believe in the system, the debt-based economic system, and, shed all of your skills, have one specialized skill, work, at a job for whatever, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, whatever it was. And you would be, taken care of by the system. And now 3 or 4 generations later, the skillless and, butthurt and, just unnatural and weak and entitled and all these things, people, 3 or 4 generations later, the promise is being broken. And so the system you're 100% dependent on is going to change drastically, and your rights and your privileges and the things that you think you're entitled to are going to be taken away because it was never sustainable. And so it was a big lie. And instead of being mad at the liars and mad at the people that, sucked your ancestors into this false promise, people are going to be mad at each other based in superficial demographics. Another telltale sign is when people are in conflict and anger rises. It could be a family. Years and years ago, there was this guy named Salvatore. He was a older Italian dude from Italy. And he, a member of the Heartfulness system, and he used to travel around with Master Chargy. Master Chargy used to travel around the world and, give this transmission and cleaning. They'd have gatherings. And in America, we had this, we have this ashram in Georgia, and it was the only one, when I first started, the only real, place to gather. And it had grounds, it's like 30 acres or something. And we would come together, Master Chargy would come there once a year. And all the practitioners, most of the practitioners of the Heartfulness system, it was under 1,000 people, would come to these gatherings. We'd meditate. There was a transmission, these sittings given group meditations where you'd be cleaned out and transmitted to. And the cleaning process, the beginning of the gatherings were always filled with people feeling anxious or nervous or fearful or angry, negative emotions getting cleaned out. And sometimes there would be conflict, right, between people because they were going through this cleaning process and was bringing up the inner poison, the things that had to be cleaned out. It was bringing it out to the surface. And as you mature in the system, like you find, you just learn to live with it without venting it at other people, right, without letting it come out in various ways. And there was a lot of conflict going on in this one gathering, a lot of drama or things like this. And I was talking to this guy, Salvatore, who traveled with Master Chargy quite a bit. And he said to me, the one thing that Master Chargy really doesn't like is when there's all this drama and conflict. When people aren't mature enough to realize that they're just going through this cleaning process and these negative feelings are coming up, and just to, not engage with other people, not vent at other people, not take out their, whatever was going on in the inside of them on other people, and just, work their way through it, realize it was something that just being removed from their system, and that they'd feel better in a couple of days, which at the end of the gathering, you always felt great. Like you just were in this heavenly state. It was just this blissful state, and there was harmony, and everyone felt, united, and everyone was just, in this, just a godly state, right? Just in communion with God, and therefore connected to everything and everybody else. And so, the point of what he was saying to me is that when there was conflict, the work stops. And you can see that on any team or any, in any, workplace environment or any family or any, even in just a couple situation. When you're arguing and fighting and there's drama in your family or in your business or on your team or in your nation, the work stops, right? So America's facing all of these challenges, and there's more division. The Democrats and the Republicans have never been more divided, the left and the right, and then, even here within the truth community, because you have all these other, you got the fake woke people, you got the QBs, you got all these people that are, very oppositional and very arrogant, and, just they can't handle anybody having any sort of a different belief system than them. And the comments and the arguing all across the internet, just the drama and people, no, you're wrong. And you just want to get into it with people, just wanting to vent at somebody in that other group that you hate, right? And the hatred and the negativity and the anger that you feel is because the illusion of the American system is collapsing, and you want to blame somebody because the things that you feel you're entitled to are being taken away, and because they were never guaranteed, but you always felt like they were. So you have to blame somebody because people don't have the ability to accept the truth of their situation and their responsibility in, indulging and going into this system that on a soul level, your soul knew. I mean, it goes away from people's soul's plan. It takes you away from your spiritual journey. And so when you look at the situations, the economic situation, the stuff with COVID, the stuff with everything, right? You look at all the issues, and it's really the debt. It's the debt-based nature of our economy. But if you look at all the problems that are there, you look at the crisis that America and the world is under, you think that if there was any chance of us solving those problems and fixing all these things, we can do it when there's all this conflict and drama, when people are more divided than ever, based in the superficial aspects of their periphery. And by bringing these things out, where each group, each person is hyper-focused on their appearance, based on their race, based on their skin tone, based on, all of it, right? And it's, there's such a superficial aspect to life in general, makeup and, these makeup channels and the Kardashians and plastic surgery and all the, the modeling nature and the clothes and the everything and the, all of it. Like people are way too focused on their, external appearance and what separates them, what's different about them than other people. By focusing in on our differences, you think that's going to bring about some sort of united front where we can, battle and solve these problems together. It just doesn't work that way. When people are fighting, when teams are fighting, they lose. When, there's drama at the workplace, the business goes out of business, right? The business fails. When a family is constantly fighting, the family flounders. I mean, this is how it always works. Whenever there's conflict and drama between people who are supposed to be working in a united fashion, the group fails, right? Whatever it is, a village-based family, tribal situation, whenever there's drama and conflict, the work stops. I see it all the time in my personal life, that you can be going gangbusters and creating things. I mean, building a farm, whenever conflict sets in, you can't work together anymore. Like everything, all the energy gets sucked into the conflict and you feel drained and resentful, and, it just kills your will force and your ability to motivate yourself to do work and, do work happily. And you do crappy work because you feel drained and, like a vampire sucked out all your energy. I mean, that's where the heartfulness system comes in. The energy given, the pranahuti, the transmission that's given freely in the system, the utilization of the divine energy for the transformation of man. Many people who are listening to this video have tried the practice and felt the transmission, and it's God's love that is just freely given. People are depleted, their love banks are empty, and people are depleted. And so when you start to absorb this godly energy, and then you just get into this state, like at these gatherings, and I mean, it's a state that I often get in when I meditate, and especially at these big gatherings and special times of the year, and you just feel like one with everything and everybody. You're just, bathing in the divine love, and I mean, not just people, but animals and trees and all these things. You feel the connectivity of your purpose, and that we're all, there's divinity within everything. Everything is, comes from God. Everything is created by love. Love is the media of all creation. And so you get down to the the source, right? The source that's a shared center. Our centers are the same. Our souls, the part of us that's divine, are all the same. And so when you go inside, you go, through the periphery of your life, your race, who you are as a person, all these things, and you plunge deeper into the source, you feel the connectivity of everything and everybody. But everything in our system has been divisive. Like, our system's always been divisive. But sometimes we've been able to unite as a country against a common enemy, or as a company, you unite as a company against another company, or a team against another team. But it's always been about division. It's always been about, oh, that group sucks over there, and then there's some, connectivity between one group to crush another group. But that was, always, and it's always been about divide and conquer. But that's a short-lived strategy. It's unsustainable. Like, there's a war on nature, right? War on drugs. Like, everything ends up being, a war type mentality, us against them. And then they'll bring in some fake aliens or whatever, real aliens, I don't know. Whatever it might be. And it'll be like, oh, now it's us against the aliens. It's always going to be something like that. But right now, they're focusing on division. They're focusing on this, fake woke stuff. You see it in everything, in TV shows and movies. And now it showed up in this movie about this, woman named Karen, who is like Freddy Krueger or, Jason or whatever. And it is something that they've been, pushing here, this narrative that this woman is somehow dangerous killer. And so I wanted to do this little preface to understand my point of view here, because people look at, oh, this is a white guy having a problem with white women being called out. And that's, like, anybody who watches my videos would understand that's not the way that I view things. I've been talking about division on both sides, that they've been pushing for race wars and all these things for a reason. Like, it's, there is a purpose in their actions here, the people who control the system, is because the system is collapsing, and this is their solution. This is their solution to the problem, which is a race war, and not just race, but all of it, right? A culture war, the left and the right, to get people to blame somebody else but the system itself and the people who control it. All right, so let's get back into this trailer here.
Tell me about your new neighbors.
They're black.
Do you mind?
So right now in the trailer, they are identifying the central conflict, the central problem and theme and narrative of the movie. There is a white woman named Karen who lives in a suburb, and now she has black neighbors. And so they're defining this. They want to make you ultra conscious of the whiteness of Karen and the blackness of her neighbors. This superficial idea of, these people moving into the neighborhood, and Karen has a problem with the blackness of her neighbors. And that's going to create the horror film. You can hear by the music, right? If the foreboding music, the horror film music, that's going to create the conflict. That Karen is a demented white woman who has a problem with black people, a racist woman, who is now going to victimize and torture them as she's the monster, right? This is how they're defining the roles and the story behind, the eventual conflict here.
Put it down. If you don't comply, I'll tell the manager.
Somebody's taking home security serious.
Hi, I am Karen Drexler. I'm your neighbor. You need to be taking your trash cans off the curb right when the trash is picked up.
So let's take a look at the profile of Karen, right? So you had this idea of Trump and the Trump supporters, the white male Trump supporters, being racist and homophobic and, all these things, that they created this profile. And there might be some truth to it, but most of it is, a lot of it at least, is exaggerated and not accurate factually. Like I was, saying, I talked to my brother about this, and he brought this up as something that I already knew, that whenever there's a war, they demonize, there's a name that you have for your enemy. Like in Vietnam, there was a derogatory name for the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese people, right? And in, the World War II, whatever war it is, or even before the war, there are derogatory names that you have that the government provides and the media provides and the army provides for the people that you're going to eventually have to kill, because you have to dehumanize them. You can't look at them as being human. You have to demonize them. And so these things are always exaggerated. So they created this profile, and, there's been historical profiles of, people who in the past were oppressed, and of course, the way that slaves, African people were looked upon. I mean, all these ways. And it wasn't just based in race, right? The Irish, the Italians, I mean, people that came from other countries, the earlier immigration of Italians and, the people who were, my ancestors. I'm German, Italian, Albanian, and Irish. And so, there was the people that dominated, the so-called WASPs, right? White Anglo-Saxon people, and people who were Irish or Italian or, Scottish or some of these other groups of ethnic groups were looked down upon. And then eventually they started to matriculate and integrate into the, controlling system more, and new immigrants were brought in. And so you had, all these various races and ethnicities that were viewed as less than. The native peoples that were here were looked at as savages. The Africans were looked at as, underdeveloped people, all these things as a way to, justify whatever, right? Justify the oppression of people or the war with people, whatever it might be. And then it was based also in religion. And so, yeah, these things have existed for a very long time. But now, instead of trying to, get rid of all those things, or at least make them truthful, like there's, differences between people, but not exaggerating them. But that's not what's happening now. So you had all these Trump supporters and Trump himself, the white males that were, talked about the white male privilege, and that was exaggerated by the media, right? The left-leaning media and the people who are in these groups to demonize, to now sort of flip the script and demonize. You look back at some of the Disney cartoons and how racist they were and how prejudicial they were, and some of the derogatory terms for people that were okay in, mainstream culture, right? And now, instead of saying, let's get rid of that behavior altogether, it's open season on Trumpers and white men. And so to go with that, they created this other profile, this other persona of the Karen. And at first, Karen was, this was the profile that I understood Karen meant in the beginning. And it was somebody who was, OCD, obsessive compulsive, somebody who was very tightly wound, a woman very tightly wound, a woman usually with money or some level of privilege. And she was always like, concerned about other people, like, in a negative way. She was, always commenting on your appearance, other people's appearance, or in this case, you're not behaving in our neighborhood appropriately. Your lawn isn't cut, all these things. Coming up to people and, trying to micromanage them, being very upset and controlling, and, intervening in your life in some way. Somebody that I, am not going to get along with, right? People who are always offended and they're always victimized and they're always, you're always doing something wrong, right? Perfectionistic and all these things, but more perfectionistic about other people. And I've had relationships with people like this and don't like them. And there's lots of demographics. This persona, this type of person, the Karen, is not exclusive to being a white woman, because men can be a Karen and, in any demographic. In fact, all these butthurt people that are constantly complaining about being offended and being victimized, and they're always trying to change other people's behavior and cancel other people, that's all Karen-like behavior. But instead of, focusing on this type of personality and persona, which was kind of funny, right, the so-called Karen, then they made the Karen very racist, right? Karen is really, at the center, a white woman living in a privileged situation who wants to keep all the races down. In this case, she's end up going to be dangerous. And this is, not healthy. This isn't going to make things better because it's not really accurate, right? It's not accurate to the obsessive compulsive type of personality that can be, in any racial demographic or any belief system. There's people like this, and they're always difficult to deal with. It's not exclusive to white women, but now they're also demonizing white women, especially in horror films, because the two principal horrific characters, the monsters in Get Out, the movie Get Out, was a young white woman who lured black men to her family's house, where her mother, a psychologist, a hypnotist, would put them in the dark place, and they would take a white person's personality, an older white person's personality, and infuse it into the black body, right? And so this was, again, these white women are now the monsters of these horror movies. And, and how is this a good thing? Like, how is this any different from the racist cartoons and movies and things from the 50s and 40s and 20s and things like this?
Nice. Yeah, she's nice.
Wait a minute. We have a white entitled neighbor named Karen.
Karen.
Just the odds. I mean, what are the odds of this thing? Like, what are the odds? Listen to the music, how intense and foreboding it is, right? I don't like manipulative music. I've talked about that before. Without music, it's hard for movies and TV shows and sometimes commercials, and then people make videos. Sometimes truthers do this, and they put in music that causes anxiety. Like the music that they're playing here is horror music that's going to make you feel tense and feel anxious because this woman is scary.
Okay, enjoy yourself.
There she is, slaving away in the kitchen. I've
Kablowie.
come across some very suspecting teenagers.
Suspecting?
Can you please hurry up? Please, they're very aggressive. Yep.
I left my wallet.
This is a really bad movie. I mean, this is like a Lifetime level movie. It's made by BET, but it's not made for smart people. Like I said about the Cubies, right? And the woke, it is truther stuff for stupid people. Now this is, like emotionally based movie where they want to demonize these white women Karens, right? And, the people watching this and the audience this is intended for, African-American audience, to look at white women in this way, like leaving the theater angry and fearful, and, in this case, the horror music, the manipulative music, and all of it, right? To exaggerate everything, which is what the complaint was about all these racist movies of the past, right? To exaggerate the negatives of various so-called protected groups and demographics. That in the past, this is the kind of movie that was made, and therefore these people have to be protected. These groups have to be protected. But it's open season on white Karens. I mean, I'm not freaked out by this or, how I am about things. But it isn't good. This isn't going to make things better, obviously. It's a part of the problem.
With my ID at home. Leave us alone. We didn't do anything.
How the heck?
Karen is bathed in red here. She's the devil, right? They do this quite often in music videos. Red, the color red, they bathe the stage, and it is to associate with the devil, and Karen's some sort of a devil here. And now they've also brought in the cops. The cops are abusive. They are going to be hateful towards this African-American people here. And so they are Karen's army, right? Karen's racist army, that the Karen complains and the cops administer the abuse for the Karen, right? For the white woman Karen. I mean, this is the narrative they're pushing for, more division and more hate and all these things. More fear and all the rest of it.
Heck did you end up moving to this neighborhood? Next thing you know, we have criminals. You take care of him, and I will take care of her.
Would you mind?
So, again, they move to this cul-de-sac community, this black couple, and Karen wants them gone, right? This is, she's willing to do anything to get rid of them. This idea that, the white woman wants to hold on to her privileges at any cost. I mean, it's just, the bare basic, these narratives that are out there.
Stepping out of the car.
My office has uncovered some disturbing information on her and her brother.
Her brother's a cop.
She doesn't like black people.
We have a search warrant.
Well, I'm black. I know, she doesn't like you either.
See, what they're saying there in those weird close-ups was that Karen's daughter shouldn't be raised by Karen. Karen is a bad mom teaching her daughter bad things, so therefore the daughter should be educated and indoctrinated by other sources, maybe even taken away from Karen, right? This whole attitude, this is prevalent now. It's not like this isn't a real thing. Like, these narratives are out there in the world, that they're putting this out there that, you know, white kids shouldn't be educated by their white families. And, you know, if you're going to say a behavior is bad, this is one of my primary things I keep on coming back to. If you're going to say a behavior is bad, then you can't do that same behavior to other people. If you're saying indoctrinating children of color or of, you know, religion or whatever they are, in terms of your belief system, which was done by the white people to people of color or, you know, gay people or whatever it is. If you're going to say trying to force your belief system on somebody else was wrong when white people did it, then you can't do that when, you know, you can't say that behavior is okay when you do it, right? So if you're going to change things, then you have to change the behaviors and the structure of the system. You can't just do the same behaviors and just switch the power group. Like, that's not change. Hatred and things.
I want to sell the house.
What I do? You can't tell me, huh?
We are living next.
They have Confederate flag soap. Where is this taking place? Is this in California or something? She doesn't have a southern accent. Like, come on.
We are living next door to a racist.
You went in her house? You wouldn't want your wife to know our little secret, right?
So then this Karen, obviously there's implied sexual behavior here. She's bathed in red again, the devil. And that somehow she has, you know, enticed this guy into some sort of sexual thing that has created, that she's using as a weapon against him and his wife. I mean, this is also a very common narrative.
Standard police procedure back there.
What do we have here?
When you got a hammer, everything looks like nails.
You people are very angry.
Shut your mouth, boy.
There's red everywhere, and they're hitting for the cycle with all these, like, stereotypes and, you know, narratives. I mean, just, you know, like a really bad, dishonest movie.
Bad things happen to people that don't comply.
Karen, there's a drop of blood. There's Karen. So there are a couple of things here. Karens are annoying. They can be, you know, make your life miserable. But are they really, like, on the level of Freddy Krueger and, you know, the subject of a horror movie? Because Sarah Paulson is a Karen. She's a different type of Karen, right? Like, you have this personality type, and now they're morphing it into a, you know, personality type that also has to be a white woman who's racist as well. And she is capable of horrific actions, you know, horrific, life-ruining, life-threatening, destroying people, killing people, you know, torturing them, all these things. And this is, you know, this is the Karen that they're portraying in this movie. Because this is really unrealistic, especially now with all the woke stuff and things that are going on and things that are happening in a suburb. And that would mean that all the neighbors and all the other people in the suburb would go along with this Karen, which wouldn't happen, right? Not in reality. The most that would really happen is you would be made to feel unwelcome or uncomfortable by the neighborhood. And we've all felt that. You know, I've experienced this in my life. You know, I didn't fit in. You know, people think about when you're outside of a demographic, you think like all the other demographic are all the same. I mean, this is what you're taught as a young person, that all people of a certain demographic are exactly the same. And they all, you know, combine together and, you know, they get along perfectly I talked about this. There was some like sort of a hate group, a white supremacist group in Idaho, and my family and I were moving up to that area near Coeur d'Alene, and they had some sort of a compound, and there was some like wild stuff that was going on in Idaho and Montana, these places where there was, people who were survivalists and extremists or whatever it might be were supposedly living in all these areas, and they had this compound, and they would come together for these gatherings or whatever it was, a couple times a year. And a mother and son, like an adult son, were driving by in some shitbox car, white. They were white, and the car backfired, and these guys thought they were being fired upon, and they chased the two people, the mother and son, down, and pistol whipped them and sort of tortured them a little bit, right? And the mother and son sued and won the compound. Like they won it in the settlement, and the group had to leave. And I was watching the local news because I was interested in this, right? Because you hear things when you come from other places. This is how it is out in Idaho or something. And they had this cop on. I said, yeah, there's a couple of these groups around here, and they're not really much of a threat. They get drunk, and they usually end up fighting with each other because they're, people that live on hate and anger. They're low-level consciousness people. And we end up getting called out there to arrest a couple of them, and, then they disappear, and they don't come back for another year. And so it's a hassle for the community. But most of those people are on the fringe, right? Most people like that who are violent in nature towards these other groups. But, what you'll find is that people will make you feel unwelcomed. And as being somebody, as a person that would say that I'm Caucasian on some sort of form, I don't feel like I fit in with like most other white people or any other group. Like if I'm looking at it in a self-conscious, superficial way, being dyslexic, like having ethnic features, I look, Italian. I don't look like a normal type of a white person. I have, tan skin. I don't have, like I'm not really white. I'm tan, right? I'm somewhere between, in terms of my complexion. And, when I grew up, there was some level of maybe prejudice against me by certain groups of white people or whatever it was. And I found myself, I played basketball. Sometimes I'd be the only white guy on the court. And of course, doing the heartfulness meditation, I went to India, and oftentimes, I would be the only white person on the street or things walking down the street in India. You stand out or whatever it might be. And I come from the northeast part of Connecticut, and there's not so many people in America, white people, that look like me in terms of my facial features and things. And, I've moved across the country where I stand out just on how I look, how I talk, the accent I have, right? So I've lived in places where people look at me like, you're different, and sometimes it's a negative. You can see I'm made to feel unwelcome or whatever, right? Like you don't belong here or something like that. I've experienced that in my life in different ways. But in some ways, I don't feel like I belong anywhere in that, in a superficial, just based in my personality type and maybe what I look like or just, how I perceive other people. But when I do the heartfulness meditation and I go inside deep and connect to my soul and God, I feel like one with everything and everybody. Like I go through these, various types of, feelings about things. Sometimes I'm pulled out to the periphery and superficial differences between me and, other people. Sometimes I feel, one with everybody. I feel connected and, just in harmony and in the flow. And I've experienced this in, places all around the world and the country, in different, neighborhoods, different environments. And part of it's my personality. Like I just don't really want to fit in. Like I don't think that most people are bad or, negative in the sense that they're evil, horrific monsters from a horror movie. But I think people generally kind of are selfish and, for the most part, there's not so many people that I connect with or want to be friends with or hang out with or spend any time with. Not because of, something like this movie, but because they're annoying or, like I don't want to waste my time or, and I've said this, it's probably about 10% of the population. Well, there's two things that have happened that are, connected to these videos, this video today. I made a video, I don't know, maybe a week or so ago. You guys who watched it will remember. And I talked about how that I am, not somebody who's going to appeal to the masses, to most people. Like I have probably about a 10%, there's about 10% of the people, maximum 10% of the people that are going to like my videos and, connect with me in this, YouTube channel and content. And I just, in the middle of making this, my brother called and he talked about this guy who went to see Babaji, one of the, somebody that we know do the heartfulness system. And Babaji said to him, and again, this isn't official, this is a conversation that was had. And again, someone reporting on the conversation, but Babaji said, after all the stuff happens with the upheavals and all these things, there'll be 10% of the population left. So that's about 800 million people, going down from 8 billion to 800 million people. And I've talked about that before. I've understood this in the past, right? I've understood that there's going to be massive population reduction. We've gone up, we'll reach a certain level, and then about 10% of the people will survive after that. There'll be huge declines in the population. And what's important about this isn't about being in that 10%, because after all these events happen, it's going to be really tough to live on planet Earth. Material life is going to suck, and it's just going to be difficult. It's about reincarnating back into planet Earth, because only people who are on a spiritual level, only people who are willing to embrace, evolving into a higher level, a higher vibration, will be allowed to incarnate back in on planet Earth. The negative people, the sheeple, the unconscious people, the people who aren't willing to change and evolve won't be able to come back. And where they go isn't going to be great, right? Those, souls that are here that are, that don't make the grade, so to speak, where they're going to go, right? And I know that people believe there's only two places, but there's lots of different, places for a soul to go, and none of them are going to be, I said in the video, if you get cut from Earth, right? Where are you going to go? Where is if you can't make the grade to be on this planet, where are you going to go? So that's a big part of what I present here, is to have people aware of this. There's going to be, right now, the population's growing and there's souls coming in from the animal kingdom, and there's souls that are coming in from all over the place. And, there's just so many people, and there's so many available slots for people to incarnate in as a soul here. But that's not always going to be the case. The other thing was this, earlier on in this video, if you remember, it's long now, but Jimmy Kimmel said that Trump would call Guantanamo Geronimo, and then there was a bunch of comments reminding me that the skull and bones I talked about in yesterday's video there's this idea that they went and dug up Geronimo's grave, the Skull and Bonesers, and now have his skull in their facility. And these Native American, I believe is it Navajo? I'm not sure. Apache, I guess it is. The Apache tribe is suing the Skull and Bones, trying to get Geronimo's skull back. And so that was interesting. Geronimo came up, today and yesterday and all these things. And these are just ways of, for me, it's validation of a plan. But anyways, this thing is a mess because they're focusing on differences and division. That's the focus right now. And whenever that happens, that's a telltale sign that your system is going to collapse. Your family, your business, or whatever it is going to collapse, especially when it gets to a point where there's no reconciliation and no common ground. And it's going, it's already, I think, past that point. And so that's where we are right now. And then moving into the future from there can only be chaos, right? Because, it's going to take a long time before people can come together. And, might be 100 years. We know what happens to a country that's completely divided and then it collapses into economic depravity. This is not a new thing. It's happened over and over again, where civilization will collapse and there's complete division and it's just chaos and, and anger and hatred and all these things. And these are the things that need to be cleansed out of people so that they can move forward on a spiritual level, the heartfulness meditation. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.